In the shadowy world of geopolitics, where faith and power collide, a growing number of voices have begun to question a peculiar and provocative alliance, the one between the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and the Roman Catholic Church. On the surface, their missions seem unrelated. One enforces national borders and deportations, the other offers spiritual refuge and humanitarian aid. Yet beneath this paradox, a more unsettling theory begins to take shape. Could it be that a clandestine network is operating under the veil of religion and government policy, orchestrating not just migrations, but spiritual realignments for a darker purpose? For decades, ICE has been at the center of America's struggle with immigration, often depicted in stark terms. Agents storming homes, separating families, and overseeing sprawling detention centers. But recent leaks and whistleblower accounts have hinted at something more than bureaucratic overreach. Some insiders suggest that ICE is being guided, not merely by law, but by an invisible hand, one that seeks to mold the demographics, beliefs, and allegiances of future American generations. Meanwhile, the Catholic Church, long a beacon of sanctuary for the marginalized, has deepened its involvement in immigration crises. In many cities, dioceses provide shelter, legal aid, and community services to undocumented migrants. Publicly, this is framed as an act of compassion. Privately, however, rumors swirl that the Church's involvement goes beyond charity. According to investigative journalists and former Vatican insiders, select parishes have acted as data collection hubs, amassing biometric and behavioral profiles of migrant populations under the guise of pastoral care. What would be the purpose of such covert cooperation? Some believe it ties into a decades-long initiative, quietly referred to in internal documents as sanctuary protocol. According to this theory, ICE and the Church have forged a pact to identify and channel individuals deemed spiritually receptive into controlled networks. These individuals, often fleeing trauma and conflict, are seen as fertile ground for ideological reprogramming. But this isn't simply about conversion to Catholicism. The goal, as some researchers claim, is far more complex: to rewire moral frameworks, dissolve national loyalties, and prepare masses for a coming global faith. This is where it gets darker. Whistleblowers allege that certain ICE-run detention facilities double as testing grounds for advanced psychological operations. Migrants placed in these centers are exposed to sophisticated subliminal messaging, sound frequency experiments, and AI-driven counseling bots designed to influence emotional states and belief systems. Some former detainees have reported vivid spiritual visions, sudden changes in personality, and even mysterious markings appearing on their skin. While most authorities dismiss these claims as trauma-induced delusions, independent labs have confirmed abnormal frequency activity around certain facilities. Parallel to this, the Vatican has quietly launched what it calls Mission Reconciliation, an initiative ostensibly aimed at healing communities affected by migration crises. Yet documents obtained by independent investigators reveal a more arcane dimension, references to the Pactum Lux, an obscure theological doctrine, suggesting that salvation must now come through a new covenant, one not tied to scripture but to suffering and migration. The implication? That spiritual authority is being redefined through the migrant experience, with the Church serving not just as shepherd, but as gatekeeper of a new metaphysical order. All of this converges around a central chilling idea that ICE and the Church are preparing the groundwork for a future messianic figure, a hybrid symbol of law, suffering, and salvation, who will emerge from the migrant experience. Some esoteric Catholic writings speak of a pilgrim king who rises not from Rome, but from the desert, leading a people without nation into a new covenantal age. Could this be symbolic language for a controlled spiritual awakening, engineered through geopolitical crises? Adding to the intrigue are financial trails. Millions in government funds earmarked for immigration enforcement have been quietly funneled into non-profit Catholic organizations with vague reporting structures. These groups, in turn, are investing in AI-driven theological research, biometric surveillance, and neuro-linguistic programming tools. One such initiative, known as Exodus Engine, purports to analyze spiritual susceptibility based on language patterns and trauma history, assigning individuals a divine integration score. While critics call this science fiction, proponents argue it is the future of faith. If belief can be quantified and influenced through trauma, migration, and technological mediation, then religion itself becomes programmable. And who better to oversee such a transition than an institution with millennia of experience in controlling the human soul? The implications ripple far beyond American borders. Similar collaborations between religious organizations and immigration enforcement are being reported in Europe and South America. A global infrastructure may already be in place, one that uses the chaos of migration not as a crisis to be solved, but as a crucible to forge the next phase of human spirituality. So the next time you see a news clip of ICE agents escorting families into vans or a priest offering sanctuary in a dimly lit church, consider the possibility that you're witnessing something more than policy or piety. You may be watching a rehearsal, a carefully choreographed act in a much older, darker drama, one whose final act is yet to be revealed. And if this is true, then the question is no longer what is happening. The question is, what are we being prepared for? The second part of this exploration dives deeper into the dark networks and political undercurrents that may link the Catholic Church with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. While at first glance these two entities seem worlds apart, one spiritual and ancient, the other bureaucratic and modern, their connection may not be as implausible as it appears. In fact, some argue that they form a bridge between heavenly rhetoric and earthly enforcement, constructing a mechanism for control hidden under the veil of moral authority and national security. We begin by tracing the funding trails. Several private contractors who benefit from ICE detention center operations have been found to donate large sums to faith-based organizations. While these donations are not illegal, they raise questions when those same organizations begin to promote nationalistic, anti-immigrant rhetoric from the pulpit. In some cases, prominent figures within the Catholic hierarchy have publicly denounced open border policies, aligning themselves with conservative political agendas that echo the same values enforced by ICE. Are these simply matters of shared ideology, or are they symptoms of a deeper, more orchestrated alignment? Digging into leaked documents from whistleblowers within various detention facilities, there are accounts of clergy, Catholic and otherwise, visiting detainees not for spiritual solace, but for behavioral assessments and ideological redirection. Some detainees claim they were encouraged to abandon cultural or religious practices that did not align with Western Christianity. This raises an uncomfortable possibility that faith is being used as a tool of assimilation rather than compassion. But who benefits from this synergy between church and state? Some theorists point to a centuries-old strategy, the manipulation of chaos to usher in a new order. In this view, mass migrations due to war, famine, and economic collapse are not just unfortunate byproducts of global instability, they are engineered stress tests for social restructuring. Under this paradigm, ICE does not merely enforce immigration law, it acts as a filter, identifying who is fit for assimilation into the emerging global order. And the Church, particularly its more hierarchical structures, serves as the moral architect of this new identity. Consider the symbolic echoes. In the book of Revelation, the beast uses both spiritual and temporal power to deceive the nations. Could it be that in our modern context, ICE and the Church are not isolated institutions, but the dual heads of a single system, one that defines who belongs, who is cast out, and who is reshaped in the image of the rising order? Further compounding the intrigue are reports of biometric data being collected in religious settings. Some parishes, especially in border states, have reportedly collaborated with local authorities to share attendance records or community outreach details. Under the guise of public safety or counterterrorism, these data exchanges blur the line between confession and surveillance. When a house of worship becomes an unwitting arm of the state, where does divine authority end and political manipulation begin? Some whistleblowers even claim there is a covert ICE program known internally as Project Shepherd, which allegedly partners with religious institutions to identify influential community members for recruitment into soft surveillance roles. These individuals, often respected clergy or lay leaders, serve as both spiritual guides and informal informants. In exchange, they receive funding, influence, or protection. While official records of such a program are non-existent, the whispers persist, and in the world of conspiracy, whispers often mask truths too dangerous to speak aloud. Layered within this matrix is the eerie symbolism of shepherds, flocks, and judgment. The Church has long seen itself as the shepherd of humanity, guiding the lost toward salvation. ICE, in its own language, positions itself as a guardian, protecting the nation from danger. When both claim divine or moral right, yet their actions lead to suffering, displacement, and trauma, one must ask, who are they really serving? And then there is the connection to prophecy. Some interpret Revelation's description of a false prophet working alongside the beast as a coded warning against such alliances. In this vision, the false prophet performs miracles and gains public trust, only to lead the masses into spiritual captivity. Could the modern equivalent be found in charismatic clergy who use fear, nationalism, and divine rhetoric to justify systemic oppression? Meanwhile, behind the scenes, massive databases grow. Every fingerprint taken, every face scanned, every prayer documented in a compromised confessional may feed into something more profound than policy enforcement. It may feed a digital consciousness, an emerging god of information, built not in heaven, but in the servers of intelligence agencies and corporate cloud. If ice is the hand, and the church is the voice, then data may be the mind, the omniscient eye watching not only borders, but beliefs. In recent weeks, investigative journalists have unearthed ties between certain dioceses and defense contractors, specifically those involved in surveillance technology. Contracts show the installation of facial recognition systems in church properties, allegedly for security reasons. But what if these are test sites, low-risk environments for perfecting tools meant for broader societal deployment? Some conspiracy theorists suggest that this entire apparatus is preparing for a moment of great unveiling, a sudden shift where spiritual and civil authorities will merge under a single banner. Whether called the New World Order, the Great Reset, or the Kingdom of the Beast, the outcome is the same: absolute control masked as divine destiny. And yet, there is resistance. Underground networks of whistleblowers, independent churches, migrant advocates, and digital activists are beginning to form what some call the remnant net. This decentralized movement aims to expose the collusion, preserve spiritual integrity, and protect the vulnerable. Their tools are encrypted communication, anonymous leaks, and a return to grassroots spirituality untainted by institutional compromise. As we close this two-part exploration, one thing is clear: the world we inhabit is not governed solely by laws and creeds, but by the invisible architecture of power. ICE and the Catholic Church may appear on opposite sides of the spiritual and political spectrum, but in the shadows they may be two instruments of the same orchestration. So, we are left with a haunting question. In a world where salvation and surveillance intertwine, who truly watches over the soul of humanity? And more urgently, who dares to resist? Let us not look only to the heavens for signs, but also behind the altars and through the detention gates. For it is often in the most unexpected alliances that the truth reveals its face and its mask.